The equation's pretty simple, I think. Have test matches in South Africa this year and we get great games. It was the case for the Island Series and it was the case again at the weekend for that test against the All Blacks, which is what I'm speaking about in this video. Apologies that it's taken me a few days. I was working Saturday, I was up early at 5 working again on Sunday, so it's taken me until Monday to actually be able to sit down and watch the game in full. But I have caught up and I'm going to reflect on what we have learned from that test match about these two teams. But straight off the bat, what a test match, and two pretty strong performances overall. Neither side was perfect, but we got a great game out of it. Comment down below, let me know what you made of it, let me know what your conclusions were at the time, if that has changed over the last few days, and also whilst you're here, I'd love it if you like the video, and don't forget, subscribe to the channel as well. That way, you're not going to miss a single thing in terms of uploads. So first thing I'll say is, like, the first set of this game, the first almost 5 minutes was a precursor of what was to come, in that it was such high quality, ferociously competitive match where New Zealand had the ball in the South African 22, great continuity going through phase of phase, asking some serious questions of the Boks, and the Boks ultimately had the answer in that defensive phase to repel them. I think it got into double digits. And in a way, that was kind of the match we saw. We saw some great stuff from New Zealand, but in the end, the Springboks had enough to come back into it, but it was far from easy. And it is another narrow win for South Africa. I know it's not a 1-point win, which is kind of became their speciality last year, but another narrow win against a top quality opposition in a really, really tight test match. And I know as well, they obviously lost a tight match to Ireland already this year as well, so it doesn't go their way every single time. But it stops becoming a coincidence, doesn't it? That was one of my things thinking about this game, is when you are winning tight matches at the highest level so regularly, it's not a coincidence anymore. It's a team that knows how to win, and it's a team that really has the belief it can win. Even when it was 10 points down as we headed into the kind of final quarter of that game, you knew once they got the momentum, they had the belief to be able to get back into it. So fair play for South Africa, who were not perfect. I'm going to come on to the Springboks in just a second because I want to chat about New Zealand, because I think Scott Robertson and the All Blacks will take a huge amount from this game. And I'm going to get onto a number of the positives in a minute, but they will be disappointed, as I mentioned, letting the lead slip. In particular, and I could be totally wrong here, I'm kind of interested in All Blacks fans, what you have to say, but whether there's an issue for New Zealand, not just now, this kind of goes across different coaching groups probably over the last few years, but when was the last time an All Blacks team were able to stem the tide of a momentum really going against them? The reason I thought about that is because I was thinking back to the game at Twickenham, what was it, a few years ago? Was it 2022, I think? When they were leading, they were comfortably in front. They lost momentum in the game, and England able to score like 2 or 3 late tries to draw level. And I was thinking to a number of their games, I don't think that was relevant for the World Cup final. That was quite an even game. They were obviously brilliant against Ireland in that quarter-final in the World Cup, where there were swings in momentum, but there wasn't that real kind of wave of momentum going against them. And I was just wondering, when was the last time that they really were able to stem the tide when you felt like a game was turning and going against them? And maybe that is the big area for improvement for this team, because a lot of what they did was very, very good. They've had some good performances this year, in particular actually in some even games as well against England, where England were leading and they were able to win it late on. But yeah, just food for thought. I could be totally wrong there, but it was something that kind of struck me as I was watching it. But as I say, overall, I thought there was a lot of positives for the All Blacks. About the first 10 minutes was almost perfect, because they had the vast majority of the ball. All of the game was being played in either the South African 22 or certainly the Springboks half of the pitch. I made a note that it was about 11 minutes before South Africa properly got their hands on the ball and were able to actually go through some phases. So it was a great start for New Zealand. I think they had a really clear game plan. They wanted to play at pace. We know how dangerous they are on the counter-attack, and we saw that for one of their tries. But they just lost control of it late on. Discipline let them down a little bit as well. I don't know whether that's an element of composure, but I think if you look at the penalty statistics, it was way in favour of the Springboks. And that kind of told throughout the second half. It was getting closer and closer to the point where there was a chance they were going to lose a man to the sin bin because of ill discipline. They did, and that's when South Africa struck. But in terms of players, there's a couple I want to mention. Blackadder, I think, in the back row is looking really at home, is industrious, is getting through an awful lot of work. I thought he had another really good outing. And TJ Perenara, who is one of the more senior campaigners, but because he was out for so long with such a serious injury, how good to see him back and having such a big impact on the match as well. I thought he was excellent, TJ Perenara. You could kind of tell, like when he was leading the haka, and after the haka, after they just finished, he looked so up for it, so motivated. And in terms of the way in which I think he kind of structured the game for the All Blacks, I thought he was very, very good. So things to work on, positives, but that's maybe where New Zealand are at the moment as well. It's still a new era. South Africa. I've said already it's no longer a coincidence at one point when you win narrow margin games. And they were still far from perfect when the camera kept panning up to Rassie Erasmus throughout the majority of the game for the first kind of hour of the match. He looked pretty tense, he looked pretty frustrated, but he does have a team under his tutelage who are able to get themselves through these games. Few different things to mention, I suppose, from the Springbok perspective. A guy that we can mention basically every single week. He got player of the match again, Pieter-Steph du Toit. He's good in the second row. He's world-class in the back row. I mean, he's world-class in the second row as well. The guy just never looks tired. He does the dirty. He's an unbelievable rugby player. One of the greats, I think, we've ever seen. Not just of the modern game or this era, but I think of all time. He's kind of moving into that territory, if he's not there already. But also I wanted to mention the centre pairing, Damien Dialende and Jesse Kriel. Now I know Dialende threw the interception for the Geordie Barrett try, but I actually think as far as centre pairings go, they're not the most glamorous. They don't get the most publicity or excitement or headlines or things written about them. But they're so experienced and they're so effective as well in so much of what they do. There was a number of moments, particularly in that opening phase of the game that I mentioned when New Zealand were attacking, where Kriel and Dialende were absolutely crucial in their defence in that midfield. They were great at the breakdown as well. They had some key steals. And just all round, both of those guys, I thought were brilliant. They're not the most blockbuster. They probably don't have the best highlight reel of some centres in the world. But I actually thought they were both excellent and perhaps don't get the credit that they deserve. You know I've got to mention him. Sasha Feinberg Mngomezulu. 60-metre kick. Now I know it is at altitude, but I was at Twickenham for the Wales game right at the start of, well, midway through the year, but the start of the kind of Springboks season, if you like, where he kicked over one from I think about 55 metres. And even there, where we're basically at sea level, I was like, he's got another 5-10 metres on that. That is such a good weapon, I think, for your fly half to have. Because going way back now, one of the first games I ever saw at Twickenham was England against the All Blacks. And it was like the All Blacks team of Carter and McCaw and Nonu. And they were in their pomp. They beat England by 40, 50 points. They absolutely destroyed them. But there was a time in that game, I remember, where England conceded a penalty on the halfway line. Carter knocked it over, and you just realise if you mess up anywhere in your own half as an opposition, you can get punished. And if you could mess up anywhere within 60 metres of your own try line, you could get punished. I just think that's such an effective weapon. But that is also to reduce his performance if we only focus on that, because he was outstanding, I think. Given how fresh he is to international rugby, given the intensity of that test match, the history and rivalry between the two nations, his performance at fly half was excellent. Typified really by the kick to the corner late on for the, I think it was was it the final try? I'm losing track of myself now. I think the final try, but one of those final two tries where he kicked to the corner and got them right on the 5-metre line. It is those sorts of margins that can be the difference in games like this. Absolutely outstanding. And as for South Africa, it was then kind of what we know. I've written down power, power, power. There was a few moments in there in the game where they are so difficult to contend with because of how powerful they are. And in a lot of areas of the game, the All Blacks did really well. I actually thought the All Blacks set piece was pretty good. Their line out, in particular, close to their own try line was really good. It felt in that second half, there were a number of quite important line-outs right by their own try line that New Zealand went to the back. They were pretty ambitious with their throws and they executed it. And for the most part, their scrum was pretty good as well, which we didn't know how they would front up there. But even so, the power that South Africa have, yeah, it's pretty frightening. I don't think there's anyone that can better them in that area of the pitch. So a great test match. They go again in Cape Town this weekend. A lot of bruised bodies, I would imagine. New Zealand have to pick themselves back up. But what did you make of it? I think South Africa at this moment in time, I know there's always this thing between them and between Ireland, and they're both great teams, but I think they are the best team in the world. Their ability to get themselves out of tight matches, to come back into games, the belief they have in the team coupled with the quality and the power that they have is, it's pretty exceptional. And then from the All Blacks point of view, as I say, you're going to be disappointed, but also I think encouraged. That is not an easy task going into Joburg against this Springboks team. Some of the New Zealand players playing the Springboks for the first time. I know there were some Springboks playing the All Blacks for the first time, so it was on both sides. But you'll take an awful lot out of that. Great test match. What did you learn? What did you make of it? Let me know in the comments. Like the video as well and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.